All right. So thank you everyone for attending Alumni Career Connections. For those of you who are new to this program, we bring alumni back to campus. We partner with the Fleischman Center and then also the Watson Alumni Career Connections office on this one because Tony is a computer science major. And we bring alumni back so you can talk to them, learn from them, ask questions. So Tony will do about a 15-minute intro, and then we'll turn it over to the students to ask questions that they might have. Just a quick overview. So Tony is a 94 grad. He earned his BS in computer science and currently works at McFarland Johnson Incorporated as the tech team manager. And with that, I will turn it over to you, Tony.
Well, thank you very much, Emily. Thank you all for attending. It's exciting to be able to virtually be able to see some of you. Oh, I see we have some additional students arriving. That's great. I don't have anything super formal prepared for the first intro here, so I'm just going to run through a little trip down memory lane, I guess, to how I got from where you're sitting to where I'm sitting, and hopefully make some points along the way that will help you. And then the Q&A session obviously will be where hopefully we get a lot of questions, and I can really go into some detail on anything I might have covered in this first couple minutes. So obviously one of the hot buttons is to discuss a program or resource that helped me as an undergrad. And back at the beginning, I can say that the co-op internship program pretty much kicked off my entire career. And I feel very fortunate. I'll probably say fortunate and lucky along the way here a whole bunch of times. But it just happened to work out in a lot of ways for me. I'm from Binghamton. I went to Binghamton, obviously, and I still live in Binghamton. So that puts me in a unique situation. I know most people don't follow that path. Most people, there are obviously a lot of people are from all over, a lot of downstate people, a lot of friends that I was, associated with in my years as an undergrad. A lot of them moved away, went to other locations, but there was a lot of opportunity here as well. So let me just kind of recap what sort of happened to me. So as I got involved with that program, along with just happened to know someone at this company, I was able to basically land a job while I was still an undergrad. The company's name was Miller Aviation. It was at the airport right up here in Binghamton, back when we used to have a lot more aircraft. Anyway, Miller Aviation was a small aviation company. It was about 100 people, so not too small. It effectively helped with people who had private aircraft. So to give you just a tiny background, if you owned an aircraft or a corporate jet and you happen to land in Binghamton, you need things like fuel, and you need it cleaned, and you needed to, clean the windows and kick the tires and all that kind of stuff. So we did a lot of that. We also chartered aircraft and did a whole bunch of things in the aviation space. So I came there as a computer operator, not necessarily a programmer in my first position. So, I'm thinking I'm going to walk in and dazzle everybody with my computer science knowledge. And next thing you know, I was, doing printouts and backups and server upgrades and fixing printers and whatnot. So it was a great experience to kind of come out and test your skills in the real world, because it's a lot different. There's so many aspects that are different, especially on the technology side. I assume that most of the people I'm going to be talking to today are either in the computer science field or thinking about the computer science field. So I'm not going to talk too much tech stuff, but I'll, use a couple words here and there probably. So long story short, I'm at Miller Aviation for a couple of years. Got into the actual software development. They used to have their own software package, so I was able to contribute to that. That was great. The company was owned by three people. One of them, his name was Jim Miller, hence the Miller Aviation part of it. And he was a former IBM employee engineer. So it's going to be funny how the IBM thing is going to tie into everything I'm going to say for these first couple minutes. So here he was, someone who left IBM and started his own company. And IBM, as you hopefully know, was founded here right near Binghamton in Endicott. And the founder slash CEO and chairman of IBM was Thomas J. Watson, hence the Watson School of Engineering that we're all in. Hopefully you have some familiarity with Thomas J. Watson and maybe some of his lifetime highlights. If you don't, I would encourage you to look it up. It's very interesting. It's no coincidence that his name is on the building, which is awesome. So the IBM ties in with Miller was an IBM business partner. So we used to do a lot with IBM back in those days. And today, when you think of technology, you think of companies like Google and Facebook and Twitter and all these big companies, right? Apple. Well, back then, I sound like I'm 100 years old, but back then, getting a job at IBM was like equivalent to going to Google today. Like an IBM job was what everybody wanted. And so being able to work along with some people at IBM while I was at Miller really changed the trajectory of my career. And we got into doing a lot more stuff than what they were doing just at Miller. We were, all of a sudden, I was traveling with IBM all over the country, installing systems, working on software packages for them. And it was kind of amazing the way it all happened within about 5 or 6 years. So I literally kept my internship job that I started with and turned that into a six-year career basically at Miller. So here I was now sort of almost a consultant more than just an internal IT person for Miller. Well, as things happen, Miller was bought out by a larger company around 1999, and they were based out of Cleveland, and they were really into the aviation part of it and not so much into the technology part. So the technology part of where I was working was actually sold off, sort of acquired in a merger, if you will, to this company out of Corning, which is about an hour west of here. So maybe you've heard of Corning Glass. That was not the company. We were a much smaller technology company called Corning Data Services, and we did consulting, software development, and whatnot, for most of which was for manufacturing, large manufacturing organizations. So I got a lot of experience all of a sudden now transitioning kind of out of aviation and anything that we were doing with IBM over to this manufacturing experience. Well, coincidentally, or maybe not coincidentally, Corning was owned by someone who left IBM. Another former IBM person started Corning Data Services. So here I am working for this person now. And around that time is when the internet really took off and everybody wanted a e-commerce website, and so we're building shopping carts and ways for different businesses that used to just be brick and mortar stores to transfer data in between locations. Again, a lot of business to business communication, and all that was just exploding. So that clearly was not anything from a technology standpoint that we learned at the Watson School, because that didn't exist in those years. So point here is really being able to change and adapt. And I'm sure this applies to, all different curriculums, but really, especially in the technology curriculum, you have to be able to adapt to this changing environment, because the code, the way we did stuff back then is totally different than the way we did it then at Corning, and even way different than the way I do it today as I sit here. So again, sort of long story short, with Corning, I was there for several years. We built some products. It was a great experience. We did a lot of, again, that's when we were doing all of a sudden, instead of building Windows applications and the applications that sat on your PC back at Miller, all of a sudden now everything was a website, web-based. Phones weren't quite out yet, but the web was really kind of booming. So that was that. And then lo and behold, I was contacted by a former coworker at Miller, whose friend happened to start a company here in Binghamton called Blue Storm Technologies. And they were looking for IT people, software developers. And his friend, take a guess where he used to work. If you guessed IBM, that's correct. He also quit IBM. That's actually how they got the name Blue Storm. So IBM the nickname was Big Blue. So he left IBM in a storm, he claimed, and called his new company Blue Storm. And I worked there from around 2003 up until about 5 years ago. So that was, again, a great experience right here in Binghamton. It was all software consulting across all lines of business. So I'm doing everything from, school districts to law firms to pharmaceuticals. I think I had mentioned as one of the little bullets on my bio thing that I had traveled to Sweden. So when I was at Blue Storm, we used to do some work with BMW, and we did some work with the large pharmaceutical company over there. And I actually had to go to Sweden for a couple of weeks to work on some software projects. So it was very exciting. We did a lot of work with large insurance companies, which was definitely not as exciting, because insurance is not super exciting, but it is what it was. And so here we were. I did all that for several years, and it gave me great experience because Blue Storm was involved in some really, really large projects, larger than even the ones I was working on with IBM, with 30, 40 developers, programs that took 5 years to develop. Again, from a management standpoint, I was forced to learn a lot more about project management at this point. It wasn't just programming every day. Transition more into management, being able to understand how to manage your resources, manage projects again. And again, it was a great experience. And just to wrap up, so I got from there about 5 years ago, I was contacted. Actually, we would do some work for McFarland Johnson, where I'm currently sitting. And an opportunity arose to sort of take a fledgling, if you will, IT technology environment that they were doing here, because this is a engineering and construction firm. So we have, out the door where I'm sitting here, we have a slew of mechanical engineers, electrical engineers, environmental engineers, not a lot of software engineers. We have some now that I'm here, and I've actually built a small team of other developers. And we have a large aviation presence as well. So in a weird way, I've sort of come full circle back to aviation. So we do a lot of work for airports. Not here. I do a lot of airport work in Florida, Fort Lauderdale, Miami, South Carolina airports. We do some stuff in Detroit, some stuff out west, Nebraska. So we're sort of all over the map when it comes to a national presence for this company. And I was able to take all those skills I've learned across those first few companies, and again built an entire organization here, small division, if you will, to help us expand the technology reach of the services that we offer here at McFarland Johnson. So I guess, I don't know, coincidence or not, but almost like 3/4 of my staff is made up of BU alumni as well. And we've had an experience, I've had multiple experiences getting BU interns, computer science interns for my team. I've seen plenty other interns here in the other engineering disciplines, electrical engineers, mechanical engineers. So we are very engaged with the university. As a matter of fact, our company president is Chad Nixon, and he actually teaches a class on campus. So we're obviously very engaged, and that's kind of how I got from there to here, which is a lot of words. But really that whole adapting to change, is sort of the theme of that. So I really have only had 4, you'd say, sort of major jobs along that career path. And yes, they were all in the IT software engineering space, but it has changed so much. And the only thing I could stress is that, that will happen to you as well. You need to be flexible. You need to, really embrace that kind of change. These mobile smartphones we're carrying around in our pocket are way more powerful than all the computers we used on campus back then. And it feels like it's 100 years, but it hasn't been 100 years. But as you take from today moving forward that same amount of time, I guarantee that all the things that, the laptop I'm looking at now and the phone that I have in my pocket and you probably have in your pocket, we're going to laugh at those devices in that block of years, and it'll all be different. So the people who are in this space will have to adapt and apply all the great fundamentals that you learn in the program, but adapt it to new languages, new platforms, and whatever else people invent. So with that, tell me, I think we can kind of wrap up my historical run through. If there's questions about any of that or any other questions, I'd be more than happy to try to elaborate or answer.
Speak up, the microphone's up front here. So I don't know if you want to hop in one of these chairs, sorry.
Do you hear me well? Hi, Tony.
Hi.
Thank you for sharing your experience. I will great like summer, but I want to ask you one question. Think back 20
Sure.
years, 5 years ago, did you envision your career as it today? 20 years ago, and when you graduate, what do you think did you envision the career at today? Like the career, do you think the long term of the career, like
Like
when you
30 years ago, what did he envision himself doing in 30 years?
yeah, and what do you think is the change before and after right now? What's the difference?
And what's the largest change from then to now?
Yeah, because I will great like summer, but I don't know when I do over 20 years in the future what I will be do. Like, sorry.
Okay, I'm having a little trouble hearing, but I think I got it. So did I envision, the first part of the question sounded like, did I envision sort of my career going this way back then? Was that kind of fair? I'll be honest with you, no. I had no clue what to do. You know, one thing that I'll point out that's probably pretty obvious, but I'll say it anyway. You know, computer science degree can take you in so many directions. You know, what I do compared to working at Google or Amazon or, you know, NASA or doing flight controls is so different. Business applications versus making games, completely different. You're going to apply a lot of the same fundamentals, obviously, you know, algorithms and the ability to, you know, understand processing and all that kind of like technical stuff that goes along with it. But I didn't envision it because I wasn't sure where that path might take me. And it was really just a coincidence. And you probably heard me say, I mean, a lot of it was just, some of it was kind of fortuitous. I just knew some people. I got in the program and happened to have a job that got me into sort of with these IBM connections. And it just one thing turned into the next. And I've enjoyed every step along that way. That's certainly not the way everybody is going to go. You know, people aren't going to stay here. People are going to go to bigger cities. People are going to, you know, there's so much opportunity. The nice part is within a computer science degree, I mean, you have this huge range of spectrum of lines of business. It doesn't pigeonhole you to one specific thing. I mean, you know, you want to work in a casino, they need programmers. You want to work at a store, they need programmers. I mean, everybody needs software in one form or another, you know, a mobile app or whatever it might be. So I did not envision it, but I'm quite happy with the way it turned out. And I mean, I'm not at Google, but, you know, I'm sure people at Google quit Google because they want something else too. I mean, it's just really, you know, where your family is, where you want to settle. There's so many factors as you grow and mature and you know, really build that career. So I did not envision it, but I don't know that anybody could. I mean, I wasn't really. I know a lot of the. I'll give you a different example. A very good friend of mine as an undergrad. He was from the city, and his dream job was to go back and work for one of the big firms in Manhattan, and Goldman Sachs, right? So I remember Goldman Sachs. They came on campus. I think a bunch of the big firms do interviews, or at least they probably still do. They certainly did then, and he was able to turn his computer science degree. He got his exact job, and I talked to him to this day, and he's still working there, and he loves it. So. Some people, you know exactly what they want, and that's what they go into. So maybe you're a game designer and you want to work for, you know, the high-end game company, you know, go for it. I was a little more, I just kind of like went where it took me, and it just happened to work out. So that's that part of the question. And then the other part was something like the largest change. Are you talking like the largest technology change?
No, your thinking, like when you graduate and right now, what the change of the thinking about the job or the career?
What was the change in your thinking, Tony?
Change in my thinking?
Like when you graduate is a very thing, you don't know what you want to be, and right now you know what you need to do, right?
So what was your change in thinking from when you started your career, like with your internship, to now? Are you, you know, I don't know. Tony?
Yeah. I think most people, maybe not all, but a lot of the people that I've come across over the years who start with technical degrees, a lot of them move into more of a management role. Some of them go into a sales role. I've met a lot of people, especially with IBM, back in those days, who would come up to me and they'd be a sales representative and they'd be like, oh, I wrote code for 3 years, or I was a programmer for a few years. And then you transition out of it. It really, once you get into whatever line of business, certainly you're going to have a starting job, which may or not be exactly what you want to do. Maybe you just need that first job to get your experience, because everybody does. At that point, you're going to be exposed to so many more things in different aspects of business. And then I think it'll be certainly more obvious to what things you do like and don't like. I found it very difficult until I was exposed to that. I didn't know anything about business. As a student, you're writing, you're doing assignments and handing them into a professor for a grade, right? That is not what you end up doing in the real world. You have to, those things become solutions that you deliver to people or to a company. And all of a sudden they don't just grade them and give them back and you forget about them. They now, use them every day, and it becomes, there's support and there's all the things that go along with software development. I'm talking that very specifically, but yeah, so many things that you aren't exposed to at the college level that all of a sudden you are. And so, yeah, your thinking definitely changes. Some people go into more of a management. That's a little bit where I am now. I still do some technical stuff, mostly because I like it. I could probably make my team of developers do all the programming, but I still enjoy it. I think that's a big theme, at least in our specific genre here of computer science, right? You don't do it because somebody says you make a lot of money to do it. You like solving problems, you like technology. If it's, I'll tell you this right now, because I've run across over my years programmers that just don't work out so well, and they just don't have that knack of that enjoyment almost of the problem solving. And the programmers that do have that do very well. The ones who just want the job and they don't like programming, they don't last very long. They don't do really well, because you really have to have a certain affinity for that type of problem solving and really, enjoying turning the computer on every day, or, doing whatever you might be that you're doing. But, at the end of the day, you're really solving problems and you're working with people much more than you are working with just computers. That's another huge thing that maybe I didn't stress, but you think that maybe the job is, well, they're going to sit me in a cube and I'm just going to type all day and write code or whatever and design stuff. There's so much human interaction and dealing with, the meetings and the collaboration, if you will, of what it takes to really do things like this in the real world. Totally different. So people skills, communication, documentation. There's a lot of writing that is not computer writing. It's, a lot of again, documentation, presentations you have to do. There's a lot of that, and but it's great. And that's, again, I'm giving you a pretty specific example. I'm sure some of it applies, but in different lines. If I'm writing flight controls, again, it's a totally different experience. But in general, I think a lot of what I'm saying applies across the board.
Yeah.
I don't know if that helps you at all.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's great. Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Tony, you mentioned you must be adaptable when working with software. How have you been able to remain adaptable?
Really, for me personally, again, it comes down to having a certain, I don't want to say, I guess passion is the right word, but you have to really like it, and you have to like that change. And for example, again, I don't want to get too technical, but so you probably heard the word Java. Java is a programming language, and it's very common now. Well, back then it wasn't. And what I'm doing right now and what my team does, a huge majority of it is still in the programming language of Java. Well, that didn't exist back then, but it came out and it was obvious that it was going to be popular. So I ended up actually going back to BU to take a Java course. In other cases, I had to learn some other languages, some stuff that IBM was doing back in those days. It's a matter of getting books, I mean, now you can Google it. There's YouTube. There's so many more resources now to learn new technologies, new languages. But yeah, that adaptability has to come kind of from yourself. I can sit here and tell my guys on my team, you need to, learn this new thing and kind of try to jam it on them. But it really doesn't work as well if they don't really have that interest in it. I have to provide like, okay, I know it's going to take a while, we're going to have to learn this new technology, but there's going to be value in it down the road, and we're going to use it for X, Y, and Z. So that adaptability in our field, comes in terms of learning new languages, learning about new technologies. For example, like now we have to write applications for cell phones, that didn't exist before. You have to learn how. I mean, it's a whole different thing, a whole different platform, whole different set of languages, and all that kind of stuff. But it's kind of fun again. You in a way you get to sort of relearn some of the stuff that you applied, and we're just waiting for the next fancy widget to come out, and we'll have to adapt to that too. So it's been a constant series of adaptation, not just to the technology, but as I've obviously transitioned from different careers, different jobs, as you heard me say, so I'm working on aviation stuff one time, I'm working at manufacturing. So you have to be a little bit of again, I was a consultant, so you have to be a little bit of a chameleon and sort of like adapt to whatever they throw you into. But the values and the fundamentals that you learn in the computer science program really help with that. And the rest of it is on you in just being personally adaptable to those environments. So
Great.
that's what I would say to that.
So Tony, you mentioned that you have a lot of Binghamton University hires that you've made at your company, which is awesome. So I'm just wondering, from the employer perspective, what do you look for in new hires? What skills, and you sort of touched on some of the technical and interpersonal skills that you might be looking for. And then, how do students excel in the interview process? How do they prepare, and how do they show you that they're really interested in the position and would be a good fit?
Yeah, that's a great question. It is, I'm gonna give away some like business secrets, but maybe I shouldn't say, but and I remember doing this when I was an undergrad. So everybody comes in with a very similar looking resume, right? Mm-hmm. So I have a pile, literally a pile of when we're interviewing for interns. Everybody takes the same courses. I mean, obviously people have some extracurriculars. Some people have some other outside work that they've done, which certainly helps, which is great. Those are the kind of things that help us distinguish, It's that little edge sometimes. Mostly I like asking questions like, what have you done? Like, some people even come in and they show me, like, I wrote this, here's a web page I did, or here's a website I did, which is really kind of cool. I look for that kind of passion. I look for that they have a genuine interest. And they don't just want the thing. They don't just want the job for experience, which I understand is part of it. But we really, when I'm hiring an intern, I'm really asking them to help on live projects, not just sit in the corner and learn about stuff we do. I mean, I've had some interns come in to help build systems that are still live on our production system right now that we have both internal and external clients using. So, I mean, you get some, I need people who can really do that work. I know they're coming out of the program, which is phenomenal. I know that they're going to be able to write the code. I know they're going to be able to follow along with, diagrams and schematics and all the stuff that goes along with it. But we're definitely, at least for me, when I do the interviews, I'm looking for somebody who really has that certain spark when it comes to this is what they want to do. I try to ask them questions about why they really like it. I ask them questions about, I had one programmer as a great example, maybe not a great example, but he was on paper, he was a certainly qualified candidate, and we did hire him. This was a couple companies ago, and he would do projects, but we would review the code much like you would expect anything else, right? And he would sort of get it done, and I'd be like, yeah, it sort of works, but this is just like, you're doing it wrong. It's just like, you look at the code, it's a mess, you got, again, I don't want to get technical, but basically I'd be like, I'm like, you need to do it again, So he'd go back and he'd do it again and do it again. And then finally, he actually said to me one time, he goes, if this was school, I would just turn him in and take the C. And I'm like, C's not good enough. Like that's a bad attitude. And lo and behold, he was not an employee with us for much longer after that comment. But those are that's the difference between people. You either are doing this because you really know how to do it and like it, or you're just doing it because it's a job. And that's something, it's obviously difficult to quantify in an interview, but any little, a little extracurriculars, little extra things, as you would imagine, definitely help you stand out. So that's, I don't know, that's kind of it. Sometimes I'll give them like a little 5-question quiz at the interview just to see if, usually it's just funny stuff. It's not typically very technical or anything, but just to kind of see what sort of answers we'd get. And honestly, everyone, I mean, it's a challenge for me because so many of the people we've talked to that have come through the program are so sharp. And it's like, we're really splitting between, normally in our division, we can only take like one intern at a time. Usually it's a summer intern or whatever. It's paid, but we, it's tough to make that final decision because I usually narrow it down to the top 3 or whatever. And it's always tough because so many great candidates. So keep doing what you're doing there. Again, the guys on my team who have come out of the program, I mean, they're great. I mean, they're some of the sharpest people I've ever worked with, and I've worked with a lot of people over the years. So there's definitely something going right up there.
Oh, that's great. That's good to hear. Nice to hear that, it's not just about all the technical aspects, but the interpersonal ones too. And that's what really helps set students apart. So yeah, that's helpful. And I think another thing that we hear a lot is the importance of networking, and that, between 70 and 80% of jobs are gotten because of some form of networking or knowing people. So do you have a perspective on the importance of that for students?
Yeah, absolutely. That is huge. It was for me too. I didn't necessarily hit on it, but that when I got that internship at Miller, the friend who worked there was actually, his father and my father worked together. And he happened to already have a job at Miller. He was not a student, he different university, but wasn't a BU person. But he's the one who kind of exposed me to it and kind of, got me in the door up there. And then, I tied the internship to that particular job. So it was kind of 2 prongs. So it was obviously through the program at the university, but also knowing someone. So yeah, networking is huge. I am contacted by people all the time who, know somebody who worked with somebody. And I'm telling you that, yeah, that is definitely huge because it's so difficult, again, everyone looks very similar on paper because everyone's taking the same courses. For the most part, everyone's got really good grades. I don't want to say that having the top grades don't make a difference, because certainly they make a difference. But to be honest with you, when I'm making my decision, I have never sat between 2 resumes and went, well, this person has a 3.96 and this person has a 3.95, so I'm going to take 3.96. It's always, what did the person say in the interview? How did they follow up? Did they seem more engaged? Did they seem confused about something? Like all those little interpersonal things, like you said, makes a huge difference. So grades clearly are important because that applies to how well you're going to do some of it, but it's not the end all be all as far as getting the job. It's not in my interviews anyway.
Do you have any other questions?
Tony, were there any student organizations or programs on campus you involved yourself with that helped teach you skill sets you use today?
Sadly, no. Sadly, no. I was not. I was, do they still call us townies? I was a townie. I'm from Binghamton. I go to Binghamton. My interaction on campus was pretty much, doing my, attending classes, going to the pod. Do they still call it the pod? I don't know if they still call it the pod, but where the computers were when we had to actually go and use the computers on campus. That and engaging with classmates, that was the height of my engagement, unfortunately. I had a very good social calendar, but I don't think those really applied to the work. Probably shouldn't go into all those, but anyway, yeah, I mean, that certainly helps on the interpersonal side, being able to connect with people who are from different areas, different nationalities, different backgrounds. So, but no, not any specific, structured organization. I wasn't really involved. I was kind of like in and out, which if I had to do it again, I wouldn't do it that way, but that's how it was back then.
Right. Good question. What made you decide to stay in Binghamton after graduation, that you didn't like leave? I know you said you were from Binghamton, but was there, I mean, obviously you had the Miller job, but like, you said you traveled a lot, was there anywhere else that you wanted to work, or you just enjoyed the job so much that you didn't?
Yeah, you know what, the Miller job changed my attitude. I was, as you'd imagine, most people, not that there isn't some great opportunity here. I guess I'm a test case for opportunity here. And I can, walk out the door here and give you some other great examples. So there's obviously opportunity here. And yeah, I wanted to leave as well. And I had looked at some other opportunities, and quite frankly, maybe kind of going back to that initial question about did I envision it? So that Miller job wasn't supposed to last 6 years. That was just like everybody else, I need my experience job but it turned into this ridiculous thing where I was going to Florida, I was in downtown Chicago setting up, systems in California. And I felt like I was traveling so much that even though I lived in Binghamton, I felt like I was all over the place. And I was, 20 something at the time. And here I am doing all this business travel, and it was pretty exciting, and corporate jets. And so it kind of like quenched my thirst, if you will, for wanting to leave the area, because, now here I was, calling my parents. I'm like, well, I'm in Denver, and I'm going to San Francisco. And so that really sort of, I don't know, I guess slowed down my ambition to immediately want to leave. And then, during the course of that, those careers or those jobs, as part of my career, I should say, I got married and my family's still here. And then I had some nieces and nephews. The next thing you know, you're tied into a lot of things that have nothing to do with your job anymore. You're just more tied to the area. So I'm sure you'd get a lot of other similar stories to that. But that's really from my personal perspective, that if that Miller job didn't have me all over the place, I might have just been more likely to, up and look for other opportunities. But that's how it worked for me.
You also talked about how like the first job, a lot of people seek out for experience. How do you go about, like, if you don't like your initial job post-grad, how do you go about continuing to build bridges rather than burn them when you like quit to go pursue a different job? Like when you would leave Miller to go work with the other IBM people, like, did you feel like there was like tension from the first company that you were leaving, or?
No, in those specific cases, no. In my most recent job switch, there definitely was tension, because I was going from a consulting firm where McFarland Johnson was a client over to McFarland Johnson. So obviously I'm well into my career at this point, and I knew the people, and I worked at Bluestorm for, over a decade. But leaving to go to a client, if you know anything about consulting in any business, is pretty frowned upon. They weren't super happy that I was going to a client of theirs, because they knew that would mean that they probably weren't going to get work with this client anymore, and it took me away from all the other clients I was already managing at Bluestorm. So that doesn't answer your question. That's more down the road in my career. Early on, I don't think there's as much. Again, I'm talking from my personal experience, but I don't think job switching early on is going to hurt you all that often. We've had a fair amount of turnover, like all companies do, and I've witnessed it. Especially, not necessarily. Obviously, an intern is, if they don't end up getting a full-time job, they're going to go back and move on to something else. But people who have started, completed their degrees, who were using this as a first job, people move on. It's not like, I mean, even, obviously I'm like 100 years old, and I've had 4 jobs. In the previous generation, I'm sure, they had even less jobs. They didn't switch a lot. And then, this newer generation, they're switching constantly for the next thing. So I don't think there's, so much of that, especially early on, because early on, you don't have a lot of ties. You probably haven't been involved in that many projects. Maybe you don't have that much responsibility. So if you want to work a couple of years and move on, for the most part, I don't think you're going to find a lot of friction or a lot of bridge burning there. most people are pretty good about it anyway. They don't, they don't just up and quit. They say, hey, I have another opportunity, and that's just, people don't want to, stop you from pursuing your career goals. So it's not usually a big deal.
Oh, sorry, Emily. Yeah, I just had a really simple question, but I feel like you had a lot of great insights today, and I know that maybe some students might want to connect with you in the future. So are you on LinkedIn, or do you have a mentor match profile that we could get in touch with you in the future?
I'm on LinkedIn. Yep. I can't remember if it's under Anthony or Tony, but it should come up. I think it's Tony.
Okay.
But I'm on LinkedIn. I do not have a mentor match. I don't know if I should. Maybe we should talk about that after.
Yeah,
offline.
definitely.
Not sure exactly what I need to do, but I would be happy to. Yeah, anyone can engage with me, LinkedIn, or I could give you my my business email here. Yeah, they could email me. They could message me on LinkedIn. Any of that kind of stuff.
Okay, great. Yeah, just to keep the connections going, and for students even who hear the recording and may have future questions or things like that.
Yeah,
right,
yeah, absolutely. Be happy to try to help.
Tony, so you talked about work-life balance a little bit, or you touched on it a little bit. How do you go about making sure that you continually have that? Because I know you said your family's local and things like that. Just for our students, I know it probably won't be top of mind right after they graduate, but a few years down the road, I think that information might be helpful.
Sure. That's obviously going to be a very personal choice, and a ton of it, at least from what I've seen, is also relying on the corporate culture and where you work. Some places, really encourage that work-life balance, and I've been, on the side where I'm consulting with organizations, and I see that they don't necessarily encourage that quite as much. So that's a great question, especially something you should bring up in the interview. How the company addresses that. Some companies, especially ours, we put that right on, as part of our packet, as part of one of our mission statements, one of our, goals and things that we talk about right up front. So people know that that's something we tend to stress, because we know that it's important. And without one, it's hard you can't work all the time. And we do it, we do it by really flexibility in schedule, flexibility in timing, flexibility in working remote. There's certainly a lot of that. That was even pre-COVID. People, especially once you get to that point in your career and your family, where maybe you're married, you have a child, small child, whatnot. You need to attend a certain event. You have a sick child. You need to work from home that day. So there's so many more things that you need to balance than when you just start and it's all about just come in, plop down, it's all about you, do your work and come home. Yeah, that obviously changes, certainly for most people over the course of the years. So that's a huge thing, but a lot of it's at the corporate level, and it's something that anyone should be concerned about and should look into, and probably shouldn't take a job if that isn't at least somewhat addressed by that company.
Great. Any other questions?
I guess I have one more. So I feel like you touched on the process, leading up to getting an internship, and not necessarily a student's performance once they're in it. So do you have any advice as to what is really impressive to you and maybe an intern that comes on for you over the summer, and things that they do that are really impressive to employers, or red flags or things to really stay away from and not do when you're working in industry?
Yeah, that's another good question. Yeah, it's a hard one to answer. I mean, I've been so lucky with the interns, and they've all been very impressive, and they've all, brought things to the table, being able to, I like to just throw them some random, obscure task, and be like, hey, we really, we're interested in doing this XYZ, but we don't know a lot about it. Would you, do some research? And their ability to, search the right use the right resources, come back, implement something. Yeah, without getting too technical, I mean, that's really huge, being able to just adapt to, not so specific tasks. Because I think a lot of people come out thinking that they're going to come in and somebody's going to, kind of like a professor, is going to spoon feed it. All right, here, I want you to do this exactly. That really doesn't apply, certainly in our field. Usually it's a much more generic task. Like, we need to do this project and it's going to involve a whole bunch of pieces. And we don't even know how they're all going to work yet, but you need to kind of be able to, I'm not going to stand over you and be like, okay, check this one off, check this one off. You're going to have to be able to work on your own. That's an impressive skill. Be self-motivated, not needing me to stand over your, cube to make sure you're not, on, the ESPN website or, whatever it might be. You're self-motivated to do your work. And then again, personal skills, being able to communicate with coworkers, outwardly engaging without having to be forced, to try to, all that kind of stuff that helps in the corporate environment. So those are all good things. Red flags, I don't know, tough to say. The opposite of what I just said. Anybody who doesn't seem to be able to, do things on their own, that would be a red flag, because it just, again, it might be different in other fields. It probably is. I'm being pretty specific, but for us, we need people who can self-motivate and just get tasks done and move on. So yeah, it's really not that hard. It's not that different. It's just it's different enough, than you'll see, although they all see, they come from an environment where, like I said, you're tasked with a very specific thing typically. You don't always work. I know they do some teamwork, but working with a team is a huge difference. You certainly, in our field, obviously you can't work too much as a team in your coursework, because you're expected to learn it by yourself, and it almost seems like collusion if you're teaming up to come up with solutions. But in the real world, you almost never. I don't sit any of us down and be like, well, you have to do this all by yourself and you can't ask anybody else for help. Everything is so much more collaborative, especially when you're working on teams of 30, 40 programmers, maybe on a huge project where you're only writing one piece, but your piece has to work with this other person's piece. So, all of that communication has to be there. It's a lot different. I think it's much more exciting than doing coursework. And so those skills, they come, but they're not usually there as the person walks in the door. So those are some of the things we look for.
All right, well, thank you so much, Tony, for your time, and we really appreciate you sharing your insights on the industry. And for the students kind of tuning in, we'll be sending out an email for kind of evaluation, and we'll also send Tony's contact information in there as well. So thank you again.
Well, you're all very welcome. I hope it was somewhat helpful, informative, and definitely my pleasure. So thanks for having me.
And hopefully we can meet in person sometime soon.
Yeah, let's hope.
Thanks, Tony. Have a good day.
All right.
Hi, Tony. Thank you. Very nice to meet you.
Yep. Same to all of you. Nice to meet you. And hopefully we'll be talking again sometime soon.
Sounds great. Bye.
Okay. Thanks. Bye.